Alright, I'm gonna level with you guys. I don't really know what to make of this one, but we're gonna talk about it. The Lost World Jurassic Park. So The Lost World Jurassic Park, or Jurassic Park 2 as I usually call it, but that's not what it's called. It's called The Lost World Jurassic Park. A weird naming convention if I ever saw one. But it came out in 1997. Once again, Steven Spielberg is directing, and it's based off of the book The Lost World Jurassic Park that Michael Crichton wrote at the behest of Spielberg to further the Jurassic Park storyline, because he didn't want to just make up a story, so he had Michael Crichton, the author of the original book, write a sequel book, and when that book came out, you bet he was getting on that movie. And if you think that's kind of a rushed and forced way to go about making a sequel, that's kind of what it feels like. But maybe rushed isn't the right word. I think derivative is a more accurate word to describe this movie, because as the title suggests, this movie borrows a lot from The Lost World, the Sir Arthur Conan Doyle book from ages ago that was turned into a stop-motion dinosaur movie in the 20s. That's actually pretty entertaining, and it's very obviously the visual inspiration for the movie Up. But where that story was about finding this undiscovered country and exploration and adventure, this movie doesn't really know what it wants to be. It's kind of a conservationist movie. It's got a bit of Mighty Joe Young in it. It's got some King Kong sprinkled in there in the third act. But it also has to serve as a sequel for Jurassic Park, a park that never really opened to the public. So where do you really go with that amusement park full of dinosaurs concept when the amusement park side is kind of dead on arrival at this point? Well, the movie opens not on Isla Nublar, but Isla Sorna, Site B, the second island of dinosaurs that was kind of the breeding ground for all the dinosaurs. It's where they grew the dinosaurs before they were mature enough to ship to the main island. So yeah, that tracks. Okay, I'm on board so far. And you see this very rich family enjoying a summer cruise, and they stop on this island and they're just kind of having a good time. And their daughter comes across a bunch of little dinosaurs and she gets attacked, and the parents find her and scream at the face of Ian Malcolm in probably one of the best match cuts I've ever seen in the movie. It's at least one of the most hilarious, and this is where you run into a bit of a tonal problem here, because on the one hand it takes itself very seriously, arguably even more serious than the first movie in its message, because it dabbles in this idea of how do you treat these animals humanely and study them and understand them. But on the other hand, you have edits like this that just feel really goofy and kind of out of left field, and I don't know how to reconcile the two. But anyway, Ian Malcolm, once again played by Jeff Goldblum, is tasked by John Hammond to lead this exposition onto Site B to help understand the animals and scientific advancement and all the usual BS. And of course Malcolm is not game for it. He barely got off that first island alive. There's no way he's going back until he finds out that his girlfriend Sarah, played by Julianne Moore, and she's a paleontologist, she's already on the island, so he agrees to go, if for nothing else, just to get her off and get her safe and rescue her. So the movie really wastes no time in getting us to the island. The reasons are kind of vague, not that important, very complicated, very technical, and we know that InGen is being run by Hammond's nephew, and he's kind of sleazy. He's only in it for the money, you know, he's worried about the shareholders and the profits and all that. But when we get to the island, we find out that Malcolm's daughter, I just realized I can't remember her name, so that should tell you how much of an impression she left on me. She's stowed away because Malcolm's not exactly the parent of the year, and he was supposed to look out for her this weekend, so she tagged along and stowed away in one of the crates. So now she's on this island too, which makes Malcolm even more nervous and anxious to get off the island before the two women in his life that he actually cares about are dead. And I guess here's as good a time as any to talk about the performances in the movie, and across the board, they're not very good, are they? Especially Jeff Goldblum, and I'm not really sure who to blame, whether it's him or Spielberg or the dialogue coach. I don't know what happened, but there are some line deliveries where I'm like, yikes, did George Lucas take over directing or something? Because it is not natural. And it's a shame because there are some good actors in this movie. Julianne Moore, she's a good actress. Vince Vaughn is actually kind of trying. This is before he got big with his Vince Vaughn-isms and his comedies. So he's actually trying to deliver a decent, unique performance here. There's just something about the acting that just isn't measuring up. And maybe some of it is because Ian Malcolm wasn't really a main character in the first one, so he just kind of popped in for a little bit and then left. So his little eccentricities added a nice supporting flavor to the movie. But here they kind of toned him back. He's not as eccentric. He's not as Jeff Goldblum-y. He's a little more subdued here, which I guess makes him more palatable to the average moviegoer because he's not this conceited jerk that he was in the first movie. And also the fact that he has to look out for his girlfriend and his daughter in this movie too kind of adds to the sympathy that we get from him. But I still think you could have done that while keeping the identity and the strangeness of Ian Malcolm intact. Just use the other characters like Sarah, for instance. They have a lot of scenes together as kind of a grounding force for him to bounce his weird ideas off of. Just something to make this movie feel a little less run-of-the-mill and derivative and more of a unique experience with characters that you remember and can differentiate from the rest of the people in the group, because the supporting cast in this movie are all the same stock paleontologists, scientists, big game hunter archetypes that we've seen a million times and will see a million more times too, I'm sure of it. But what this movie is really lacking is the imagination that fueled the original Jurassic Park, that idea that a theme park full of dinosaurs could exist and could operate. Yeah, it's a terrible idea and it'll break down and people will die, so you shouldn't actually do it, but the idea is a cool one. And from a production standpoint, the different ways you can incorporate theme park attractions with dinosaurs as like background set dressing, there is so much potential there. And even though the timeline now is that Jurassic Park had failed and now they're kind of picking up the pieces, the aftermath, the idea of a dilapidated, overgrown amusement park that has a bunch of dinosaurs running loose, and as they investigate you can see these ideas and kind of get in the mindset of what the creators thought this could be, that is full of great potential. And it makes me wish that this movie took place on Site A and not Site B, because Site A was the park, that was the theme park. So if they were to go back there, you can see kind of how that park had been overrun and just destroyed over the last couple years, and how the dinosaurs have really taken over. But you still have that glimmer of nostalgia and that dream that John Hammond had that's dying before our eyes. I just think that would have made it feel more like a Jurassic Park movie and less of a The Lost World movie. Now let's talk about the Lost World-ness of this movie. And The Lost World by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle is a fine story and highly influential. Any story that you've seen on screen or read in a book that involves dinosaurs living among us is influenced in some way by this story. It's kind of like War of the Worlds and the Alien Invasion movie. War of the Worlds isn't a complex story, but it is the template for how to do an alien invasion story. All the beats that you need to follow are in there. Same thing with The Lost World. How do you do an adventurous dinosaur hunting story? There it is. And looking at this movie from that angle as a remake of The Lost World, it actually kind of works until the third act and the message gets a little confused, but the first two acts kind of work with it. It is kind of exciting to see these characters thrown into this survival scenario, and they're going through the jungle trying to dodge dinosaurs and all that. And I will say that the sequence where the two T-Rexes attack the trailer and push it off the cliff, that is the highlight of the movie for me. That is just a wonderful sequence. And yeah, it's a little derivative of the T-Rex sequence in the first one, but the T-Rex sequence in the first one is cinematic perfection in my opinion. But this one, while it isn't better than the original, it's still really good. The effects are good. They once again used an interesting blend of CGI and practical effects for the dinosaurs, and especially for that baby T-Rex that is kind of the through line through a lot of the movie. That puppet is awesome. The actors were able to hold it and it would move around and make noise, and it's just such a cool idea to have a little baby T-Rex. And the danger that that poses, as soon as you see these humans touching this baby T-Rex, you know that the parents are not too far behind, and you know that means trouble, and trouble does come. And like I said before, trailer goes off the cliff. Pretty exciting stuff. Now, the other dinosaur encounters that are in this movie, not really as exciting. There is kind of a cool thing with the velociraptors in the grass, okay. The stegosauruses kind of walking by aren't nearly as majestic or awe-inspiring as the brontosauruses in the first one, so that's a little lackluster there. But as an homage to The Lost World, to put it nicely. It does the job you'd want it to do pretty well. But that kind of changes when we meet the big game hunters, and this one guy in particular that really wants to hunt a T-Rex bull. And this is where the movie gets a little too Avatar-y for my taste with its social messaging. Not just because it's a really obvious allegory for poaching that goes on in the real world, but because it doesn't really work here, because these dinosaurs aren't supposed to exist. Ian Malcolm's whole thesis in the last movie, and it's still kind of true in this movie, is that these dinosaurs deserve to die. They should not be around. Nature chose them for extinction. Mankind brought them back. That was a big mistake, so we should just let them die off. And that position does breed some conflict with Sarah, who's seeing these dinosaurs as more human and relatable and living, thinking beings and not just monsters. And she wants them to thrive on this island unobstructed and study them. And that could breed interesting conversations if these characters had anything all that interesting to actually say about it. Again, the script, not that great here. And that message gets a little confused when you bring in this poacher, big game hunter archetype that's the bad guy, at least on the island. And Malcolm and Sarah just kind of look down on him, but really, Malcolm should be on this dude's side. If anything, they should be more militant. They should be exterminating these dinosaurs. If anything, they're a liability to the existence of the human race. If they were to get off the island, God knows what would happen. And that's exactly what happens in the third act of this movie. But first, we have to talk about the most ridiculous and stupid thing to be in probably any of the Jurassic Park movies. I hesitate to say that because I actually haven't seen the second Jurassic World movie yet all the way through, so I am going to kind of leave a little caveat there. Maybe there's something really stupid in that movie that tops this, but I really hope not, because this is dumb. And it's when Malcolm's daughter fights a velociraptor with gymnastics and wins. And it is just as stupid as it sounds. Because not only is doing gymnastics to fight a dinosaur just kind of stupid on paper, just at face value, that shouldn't work, but it's also kind of a slap in the face to the velociraptor lore that this series has built up so far. Velociraptors were hyped up so much in that first movie that if you ever see one, you're dead. And it's only by sheer luck and yes, some convenient writing where these characters were able to get out with their lives, because so many people in that first movie died at the hands of velociraptors, and also in this movie quite a few people die by velociraptors too. But to have a little kid who only knows gymnastics, that has been completely out of her element this whole movie, all of a sudden have the courage to stand up against a velociraptor and win with a bar routine is just kind of insulting to the velociraptor. I thought that they were more of a intimidating presence and a threat than that, but I guess not. I guess Dr. Grant was wrong when he's talking about how deadly and savage and clever the velociraptor is, because I guess you do a couple flips on a bar, they don't know what to do. They're just clueless, and they'll fall out a window and die. But anyway, let's talk about the third act of this movie, because that's what people remember from this movie. They remember the T-Rex trouncing around San Diego. And as a visual, yeah, it's memorable and it is pretty cool to look at. But as an action sequence or as a suspense or chase sequence, it's actually kind of boring. I didn't get a whole lot out of this sequence. I was expecting a lot more. This climax is basically ripping off King Kong, right? You bring the monster to the city, you're gonna put it on display, it gets out, and it starts rampaging through it. The only thing is that they didn't rip off the good King Kong movies, they ripped off arguably the worst one, where you got this really sleazy capitalist guy that's gonna show off this dinosaur, and of course it breaks out, starts rampaging around. But unlike that movie where it went really hard, unnecessarily so in my opinion, with how the military and everybody dealt with this monster, the T-Rex is fine at the end of the movie. It just kind of rampages, kills some people, and then it gets tranked by our heroes, and that's really it. There's not really a satisfying wrap-up. It just kind of cuts to them watching TV, and John Hammond is on TV, and he's kind of apologizing for everything and saying that life finds a way and all that good stuff. But as for closure of Ian's kind of arc of being a better father and Sarah's kind of arc about, I don't know, understanding dinosaurs, there's no satisfying conclusion to these characters. They just kind of sit on the couch and watch TV together and all seems well. It kind of makes me wonder what happened with the ending of this movie, because the movie goes from not a whole lot happening on this island. Yeah, there's encounters and there's conversations and stuff. Stuff is happening, but it's pretty straightforward, easy to follow. But when they get to San Diego, it's this whole other movie of dinosaurs on the mainland and the hubris of InGen and a lot of King Kong references that I feel like that should have been saved for maybe the third movie, and this one should have only focused on like the science and the investigation and maybe uncovering more of InGen's dirty little secrets. But regardless, this movie goes from not enough happening to way too much happening in a short amount of time, and then it just stops. Doesn't really end, just stops. And that's pretty much it for The Lost World Jurassic Park. I feel kind of bad for not liking this movie. Clearly Spielberg wanted to make this. This was a labor of love. The effects look pretty good. Some of the effects look better than the first movie. I just don't think he had a great script to work with or a clear vision of where to really take this franchise. So as a result, this movie feels like it doesn't know what kind of movie it wants to be and doesn't really have an identity all its own like the first movie did. And for better or worse, the third movie does, but I'll talk about that next week. But at least that one, which is arguably worse made than this one, has a clear vision of what kind of a movie it wants to be. And because of that, scenes from Jurassic Park 3 have lasted in my memory a lot longer than this one. The Lost World is one of those movies where you see it, you enjoy it enough, you remember a couple interesting parts of it, but for the most part, you kind of forget about it. Now I turn over to you guys. What do you think about The Lost World Jurassic Park? Am I being too hard on it? Whatever you think, let me know in the comments. And if you like this video, be sure to give it a like and subscribe for more content and hit the notification bell to be notified every time I upload a video. And be sure to share this video with your friends because that's how the YouTube algorithm works now. As always, I'm Colby. This is my nerdy talk, and I'll see you in the next video.